Welcome to UploCare's guide on overlays and watermarks. Today, we will talk about the key aspects of image, text, and color overlay. These operations can enhance the customization of images on a website. For instance, image overlays serve as a tool to incorporate branding elements such as logos or watermarks onto images. Text overlays, on the other hand, are used to add titles, descriptions, and labels to enhance the informational context of images. In this guide, we will demonstrate how to apply image, text, and color overlays using UploCare operations. It is important to note that there is no need to write any code for this, as we will be applying operations directly to the image URL. Let's start with applying image overlays. The first thing we need to understand is the structure of the URL. Let's put the URL in the editor. The first thing you can see here is the /overlay/, which simply indicates that we are applying an overlay operation to the image. After that, we have the UID, which is the identifier of the image we uploaded to UploCare. And then we have the relative dimensions. In simple terms, these are the linear dimensions of the overlaid image. After that, we have relative coordinates. This simply indicates the position of the overlaid image. And the last thing we have is opacity of the image. How does it work? Let's just go into UploCare dashboard. I'll use this image. Let's copy the URL from here. Then copy the identifier of this image. Then let's specify the relative dimensions. P here stands for percentages. After that, just specify the position of the image so that it is on top. Here, we won't change the image opacity, so we can simply remove this. As you can see, our logo is positioned here at the top. If you want to manipulate the values, you can simply do it from here. Actually, I'd like to have 50% opacity. So just add 50, P, and a /. We have changed the opacity of the image. Here, you need to remember that all of these overlay parameters are optional. But we need to ensure one thing: the order of these parameters. I can't use opacity before relative coordinates or relative dimensions. Now let's learn how to use the self-overlay. This is somewhat similar to the image overlay, but the URL structure has a slight difference. The only distinction is that in the image overlay, we need to provide the identifier of the image, whereas in the self-overlay, we use self. The reason is that in the self-overlay, we are working with a single image. So I can copy this example, paste it here, and replace this UID with self. Let's apply this to the image. I've just inserted the value here. We can adjust the position of the image. For example, let's reposition the image to the bottom. Simply enter bottom here. As you can see, we've got a self-overlay here. Let's explore text overlay. The first thing that we need to understand is the structure of the URL. Let's put the URL in the editor. Here we can see the first parameter, relative dimensions. After that we have relative coordinates. And last one is our text. We are already familiar with the relative dimension and relative coordinates. But in text overlay, relative dimensions represent the dimensions of the area allocated to place the text. These dimensions are used for text alignment and width effects line wrapping. So let's learn how we can implement it. Let's copy the URL structure from documentation. add relative dimensions. And after that, add relative coordinates. And at the end, we will add the example text. Let's check the resulting URL in the browser. As you can see, we have the overlaid text at the top. But if I change the value of relative dimensions, it would affect the alignment of the text. Let's change the value from 50p to 100p. And now you can see the difference. Before we explore more text overlay options, let's return the value to 50p in relative dimensions. First of all, we can change the alignment of the text. We have parameters for horizontal, haline, and vertical, valline alignment. These options are really easy to use. I'll copy the value from this documentation and add it before our text. Let's specify the values haline, right, and valline, top. Now, as you can see, our text is aligned horizontally to the right and vertically to the top. We can also change the font size and text color. The first thing we have here is the size parameter and then the color parameter. Let's copy the example from this documentation and implement it by adding it before our text. I'll set the size value to 20 pixels and the color to red. And remember, we need to add the color value in hexadecimal notation. Let's check. We made the example text red. Now let's look at the text background box. In the URL structure, here we have 3 parameters. First one is mode, second one is color, and last one is padding. Mode here simply means how the background will be placed. 4 options are available to us. The first is none, the second is fit, which fills one rectangle below the existing text. The third is line, which makes separate rectangles for each line. And fill, fills all the space within the relative dimensions specified for the text. And we also have a color parameter with optional transparency. The final parameter here is padding, which increases the size of the background by the specified amount in pixels. Let's try this. I'll take an example from the documentation. We need to add this before our text. Here I'm setting the mode and color values, and won't be setting any padding, but it's easy to add this parameter yourself. Let's check the result. As you can see, we now have a text background box in solid color overlay. The structure of URL works in a similar way. Let's put this into the editor. The first parameter here is color. After that, we have relative dimensions, which is the size of the solid color rectangle, and relative coordinates, which is the position of the rectangle. Let's see how to use it. I copied this example from the documentation into the editor. First, we will specify the color. Here we need to remember that color is specified in hexadecimal notation. I'm happy with the size and position of the rectangle. Now let's test these parameters in the browser. As you can see, there is a black rectangle in the center of our image. Now let's go through the second example from the documentation. In this example, 2 different rectangles are used. Let's copy this into the editor. Here you can see the color, size, and position of the first rectangle, and the parameters of the second. In the color parameter, we can specify the alpha channel for transparency, so we can use the multiple effect. Let's copy this into the URL of our image. As you can see, we now have two semi-transparent rectangles, green and red. And that's it. UploCare offers a robust collection of URL commands to effortlessly enhance and customize your images. Feel free to explore these commands and take your image processing to the next level. Thanks for watching.